The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency has published a document that confirms Washington's role in the 1953 coup against the democratically elected Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. The open acknowledgement comes some 6 decades after the British and American-backed military overthrow. The document, published on the National Security Archive website, was initially released in 1981, but most of it was blacked out at the time, including an entire section on the coup. On August 15, 1953, the British and U.S. intelligence agencies initiated a coup by the Iranian military. The coup set off riots that led to the overthrow and arrest of Mossadegh. The Iranian premier played a key role in nationalizing the country's oil industry, then controlled by British Petroleum. Qanbar Naderi is a political commentator with me now live from Tehran. So, Mr. Naderi, first of all, this acknowledgement official now by the CIA of Washington's role. We know, of course, that before this acknowledgement was made, it was a known fact that Washington did have a role in that coup. But what is the significance of this acknowledgement now, and what does it say about relations between the US and Iran?
Well, actually, the admission today or yesterday comes after more than 3 decades of official statements coming out of the capital, Tehran, that the U.S. was actively involved in the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Mr. Mohammad Mossadegh. But this admission is just the tip of the iceberg, because the U.S. has been actively involved in coup and regime change campaigns across the globe for more than 50 years in different parts of the world, in places like Asia, Europe, Latin America, and of course the Middle East. But the methods have been the same. The idea behind all these things are just regime change, but methods have been changed. Sometimes actively and directly involved militarily, sometimes by funding and training insurgency groups, sometimes through anti-regime propaganda campaigns, and sometimes direct military involvement. But I told you, the idea is still the same: regime change.
Right, and in the case of Iran, the method that was used, Mr. Naderi, what method did the United States use? And of course, Iran has been saying that this kind of animosity, so to speak, is still continuing.
Well, Homa, that's a very good question. The reason the hostility hasn't gone away between Iran and the United States is not just because of the coup back in 1953, if I'm not wrong. No, that's because the U.S. has been actively involved in trying to do some kind of regime change in Iran for more than 3 decades now. And the problem is that it has involved all types of methods. So you name it. It has been directly, it has launched direct military campaigns like the invasion of Tabas back in after the Islamic Revolution, trying to save the hostages and the spies of the American embassy in the capital, Tehran, or funding and training insurgency groups in places like Sistan and Balochistan province. We still have the problem of anti-regime propaganda campaign around the clock across the globe through different media outlets, trying to show that Iran is the so-called axis of evil, or Iran is one of the destabilizing forces in the Middle East. And of course, we have cyber warfare that nobody has ever mentioned, that the U.S. is actively involved in cyber warfare, trying to dismantle Iran's nuclear energy program. That explains why the hostility refuses to go away between Iran and the United States.
Right, and Mr. Naderi, just before we leave you, a lot of people may be asking what was so important about that coup, what led the United States government to get involved in it and to overthrow Mohammad Mossadegh, and what difference would it make if that coup hadn't actually happened?
Very interesting question. It was the first time that the Iranian tried to taste the real taste of democracy in Iran. They elected a government that was talking to them, that tried to nationalize the Iranian oil company, which, by the way, was under the control of the American and the British oil giants. So this makes sense, because the Americans and the British, they didn't want to lose their grip on Iran and its natural resources, especially gas and oil. So what they did, they took away that first experience of democracy from Iran. Imagine if we had that democratic elected government since 1953. Until now, we would have had one of the most perfect democracies in the world. Now democracy is working, but like the rest of the world, democracy in Iran is not perfect. And we are still working on it to fix it, to make it as good as possible. But as I said, it was the first time that the Iranians wanted to have some kind of democratic government in place, but the US government said no. Just as the US government has said no in places like Gaza, like Palestine, like Syria, like Egypt, like Iraq, Afghanistan, and of course, Syria.
Mr. Qanbar Naderi, political commentator with us there. Thank you very much.